Hello, everyone. This is Scarlet Campbell with Let's Talk. I hope you're having a great day. You're probably running around doing errands to get ready for another week. And that's okay. That's what we do. You can still have a great day. You're alive, healthy, and love who you are. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in. When we love who we are, remember, life is so much easier. Anyway, last week I shared with you my adventure with ziplining and said that it was the scariest thing I've ever done. Well, I want to share a scary thing that happened to me this week. Scary in a different way. My husband and I live in the mountains, so of course we see all kinds of critters coming in and around our area. The other evening, I was walking my dog Chantel, and she wanted to rest at a corner after walking up a steep hill. She was sitting and I was standing, looking at the beautiful trees. I turned around and saw her staring up the hill of Morgan Walk. I looked up and saw a huge, big, daddy black bear loping down the hill. It could have been Big Mama, but anything that big had to be male. He was looking straight at us. I am a walker, but I immediately became a runner. I started running and felt my dog resisting. I looked back and realized that I was pulling her on the ground by her choker chain. Oh, the poor thing, I felt so bad. I helped her up, and we both became runners. The gentleman living on the corner said that was the biggest bear he had ever seen. He saw me take off and felt that there was something wrong, so he went out and saw the bear passing his house. Whenever we see a bear, which is rare, they are usually in the woods at a good distance, but not Big Daddy. Oh no, he likes the roads. I guess Chantel and I won't be looking around and enjoying the scenery any longer, 'cause we're going to be looking for Big Daddy. I can laugh about it now, but I wasn't laughing then. So, okay, let's talk. There are a myriad of subjects to talk about with all that is happening in our world today. But I decided to talk about domestic violence because this crime affects so many people and dribbles down to affect our society as any crime does. I think there is a lot of misunderstanding about domestic violence because so many people ask, didn't you know he was an abuser before you married him? Or why doesn't the woman just leave? Well, Ava Rogers will be with me later on, and she is going to talk about her experiences when she was married to someone who was very cruel and violent to her. I have done quite a bit of research on domestic violence, and this is what I found. Domestic violence is far more prevalent than any of us can imagine. The statistics around domestic violence in the United States are staggering. 1 in every 4 women experience severe physical violence from an intimate partner at some point in their lifetime. 1 in 4. That's approximately 1.3 million Americans a year. Think about that. 1.3 million women are being hit, knocked down, battered, and or killed. And most incidences are never reported to the police, unless, of course, one is killed. Over 15 million children witness violence in their homes each year, which causes many physical and psychological problems with them. Domestic violence can generally be defined as a pattern of abuse behavior characterized by the intent to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner or other family members. Domestic violence can take many forms, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, verbal, economic, and/or psychological abuse. It affects people of all ages, sexual orientations, religions, genders, socioeconomic backgrounds, and education levels. Domestic violence is a crime. It is never justifiable or excusable, and it is never the fault of the survivor. All people deserve to be in a healthy and loving relationship, free of violence. Apparently, that's not so. When you first meet someone, there usually isn't even a hint of violence from this man who seems so nice. No, abusers are usually very crafty. They seduce and charm their victim until they are sure they have you where they want you. Then the first sign of their dark side usually begins subtly with insults, a shove here or there, or by alienating a victim from family and friends. Within time, the abuse becomes more frequent and increases in severity. Most victims of domestic violence are between ages 15 and 44. When violence first begins, there are an immediate physiological consequences. They're shocked, or denial, fear, confusion, anxiety, withdrawal, guilt, nervousness, and distrust of others. Many people ask, well, why doesn't she just leave? First off, many women don't think of themselves as victims of domestic abuse until the abuse gets physically dangerous, and they eventually realize this is not going to stop. Many women think that they did something wrong to cause their partner to explode as he does. She still sees him as this very charming man that he was when they first met, and she just wants him back. She will try anything to have her real man back. Another problem of someone who should just leave is that they don't feel they have anywhere to go. There is no one to help them, and they believe that if they do leave, he will kill her. And that is a real consideration. Because statistics show that at least 500 victims of domestic violence are killed each year. 500 are killed each year. Can you imagine? So it seems that you are doomed if you stay and doomed if you leave. Fortunately, there is a lot of help today. One can go on the internet, and there are pages of resources there to help with advice, shelters, and legal rights in any state or city for victims of domestic violence. I watched a video of a woman who said that her husband was beating her up in public, and no one came to help her. She said that was worse than him beating her up. I watched another video on TED Talks on the subject of domestic violence. The speaker's name is Jackson Katz. Mr. Katz was saying that domestic violence is not a woman's issue. Domestic violence is a man's issue. When we speak of women's issues, it gives men the excuse to not pay attention. I highly agree with that. He went on to say that we have to stop thinking that violence against women is a women's issue. He brought up another idea that men have to start speaking up when another man makes a derogatory comment about women. That they have to say, that they don't like to hear comments like that because it's like talking about their daughter or wife or sister or whomever. The same when people make racial comments. We as individuals can change people's attitude by standing up for what is right, if enough of us do that. Let's all try. Let's be willing to help those who are in harm's way. Okay? Ava Rogers is here with me now. Ava,
Hi, Miss
thanks for
Scarlet.
being here. You are a survivor of domestic violence. Can you answer the questions that many people think regarding domestic violence, such as if you saw signs of a bad temper or violence before you married this man, and how you survived the abuse, how you got out of that situation?
Well, as far as signs, the abuser is going to do everything in their power to be that wolf in sheep's clothing for as long as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my opinion that a lot of the mentality of an abuser is ownership of property. So in my case, the abuse actually did not start until we got married. I had been with him about 2.5 years before we married, and had seen no signs of physical abuse toward myself. None.
Mm-hmm.
3 weeks after we got married, it started like gangbusters. I mean, it was just boom. All of a sudden, here was this horrible creature that I didn't know anything about.
Did you, at that time, how did you feel or what were you thinking? I know it's been quite a while.
Total confusion. Total, well, I don't even know how to describe what you're feeling at that point, especially, I was very young, and I came from this fabulous home where you didn't even know things like that existed. Call it sheltered, if you will. I don't think that's what they were doing. They just had they created such a beautiful home uh, for my brother and myself. We had no idea things like this existed.
Uh-huh.
So shocked, guilty, because it had to have been my fault, right? And wondering if this was what happened behind every closed door. That was a very real thought of mine. Was, wow, is this what happens? Because like I said, I had no clue that a marriage could consist of that. And then let me clarify that was not a marriage, not as God intends.
Uh-huh.
Because I was property
Right.
from that point on.
So how often did he lose control?
It was several times a week.
A week?
A week.
Really?
In my case, it was very severe, and very often.
Did he ever apologize? Was he ever sorry that?
No, it was always an excuse of he was a drinker, and it was always pretended to not remember, even though he did.
Yeah.
I mean, he would let little signs loose that he remembered. He knew exactly what was, because his father was the same way.
And can I ask, how long did you put up with this?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. Did you, at that time, think that you can't put up with this any longer, or that he's going to change?
I guess what went through my mind is if he just wouldn't drink, that it
Uh-huh.
must be the alcohol causing it. It was not the alcohol causing it. That may have intensified it, but it was not. It was him.
So he became abusive even when he wasn't drinking.
Yes, actually, the first time he became extremely abusive, sober, was the day I left.
Ah.
A little light went on in my
Uh-huh.
head, and said, no, this is just him. This doesn't have to be alcohol induced. This doesn't have to be, nothing has to happen for him to. And I honestly believed he would kill me that day. And he was completely sober.
So what did you do?
Well, physically in the moment, if that's what you're talking about, he took me off in a vehicle with my head down where I couldn't see where I was going. After driving for quite some time, being beaten in the head and face while he held me down, I knew he was taking me way off somewhere to kill me.
He had a gun.
No,
He didn't have a gun.
no, he didn't. No, I was a little, I was a little skinny mousy thing back then, Miss Scarlet. A lot different from than I am now.
Uh-huh.
And as I also said, very sheltered. So a lot more meek
Yes.
than I am now. But I will give him credit for one thing. He made me tough. That little sheltered, meek little girl no longer exists, which in
Uh-huh.
some cases is a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
But he continued to drive. Uh, I felt that this was the end for me if I did not do something. I searched. I kicked one of my shoes off and searched the door on the other side of the vehicle until I got my foot under the door handle.
While he was driving.
While he was driving, while I was being beaten around the head and face, he had my head down in his lap and just randomly pounding on me
Oh,
as we
wow.
went down the road. I felt him slow the car down. I didn't have a clue where we were. Didn't know what he was slowing down for, if it was just making a turn but I had told myself as soon as I feel it slow down where I don't feel like I'll die when I hit the ground, I'll kick this door open. And that's what I did. I came up with my fist and hit him in the face with everything I had. And I pulled that door handle, kicked that door open, and out I went and hit the ground running. I still do not have any idea how fast we were going. He was simply making a curve in the road.
So did
But God made sure I landed on my feet.
Yeah. So did he stop the car then? And
Yes, he started to stop the car and went and turned around a little bit, which tells me that we were going not terribly fast, but too fast to be jumping out of a car because it slid. It didn't just,
Yeah.
he couldn't just slowly stop it. He had to really lock it down. And I jumped and the first thing I saw was a very old house.
now this was as you were running.
As I was
wherever,
running,
you
just
didn't know
running.
where.
I did not know my surroundings when I jumped out of the car. I did not know anything, not where I
Uh-huh.
was, not what I was facing when I got out. But I saw a very old house. And as I'm running toward this house, I'm thinking nobody lives here.
There were
and
no
and we
lights
are in
on?
the middle of nowhere. Well, it was still daylight outside.
Ah.
We were in the middle of nowhere. And I'm running to this house that looks like it's too old for anybody to be there. And I'm thinking as I'm running toward this house that this is it. He's turning around and this is where I'm going to die. And I've shared this story with Miss Scarlet before. As I headed up the porch steps of this very old house, the door opened. And I can hear the squeaking of that old door to this day.
Uh-huh.
And this sweet, dear little elderly lady was opening that door because they had seen me jump out of this vehicle. They had seen what had just happened and apparently had seen the condition I was in as I was running toward the house because before I got to the door, they knew
Ah.
that someone was after me. She opened that door. Her husband was already over by the mantle, taking down his rifle. And she got me in the house, and he went to the door and let himself be seen and cocked that gun. And the
Good for
ex-husband,
him.
who had been turning around to come back after me, then skidded gravel to get out of there.
Uh-huh.
Those precious people saved my life.
Absolutely.
And the gentleman continued to sit. He got his rocking chair and he pulled it over by the door while his wife started cleaning me up and applying ice and some things that I needed, getting me something to drink, things like that, tending to me, bless her heart. He pulled that rocking chair over the door, and I'll never forget, he was rocking in it and holding that gun in his lap. And he started talking. 64 years, he said. 64 years I've been blessed with this woman, and I have never once thought about hitting her. And the more he talked about it, the faster he rocked. And that's just something I'll never forget. I can visualize that moment in my, and it's funny that that's actually a good memory for me,
Right.
considering the situation. But that little old man and his love for his wife and his willingness to stand up for me
Yes.
and shoot this man if he had come back after me, and I fully believe he would have.
Yeah.
They were my angels.
Yep.
They were my angels that night.
Yep.
And when it was time for me, when things had settled down and they thought like he was gone, they called their granddaughter and a grandson and a couple of nephews, and they came armed and ready to escort me back to town, take me back to town, and get me where I needed to be to get help. They didn't know me.
Right.
I had a few angels that night. They ducked me down in the back of that car where no one could see me, and got me back to town to safety. And they will forever have my gratitude.
And so you didn't know any of these people, so
No.
you didn't know where
No.
these people lived. You
And I
didn't-
still did not know even coming out, because they had me covered up in the back seat in case we ran across him, so no one would know I was in the car. So I never knew how to get back to the house.
Yeah.
I still don't really know where it was.
Tell the story of when you were standing in line and you thought you knew someone.
Oh, yes. It was years later, actually only about, I think about 10 years ago. I was standing in line at a convenience store, just paying for gas like everybody else, and there was a young lady in front of me. And I kept looking at her, and she had turned and kind of smiled a little bit at me. Not an odd smile, but a very sweet smile, a very
Uh-huh.
much like she knew who I was smile. And I thought, well, she looks awfully familiar, and I just could not place it. Well, I've waited tables at so many places that's usually what it is. That I've just waited on this person, and I, never knew their name, and I just recognize them. Well, in this case, my point of that was usually I don't say anything, because that probably is just somebody I've waited on,
Uh-huh.
In this case, I was compelled to say something. And so when she got done and I stepped up to the counter, as she walked away, I just kind of said, "Do I know you?" And she smiled sweetly again and said, "Go ahead. I'll wait for you right over here, and I'll tell you how you know me." And I did my business at the counter, and I walked over to her, and she was that granddaughter that drove the car that got me back to town.
Isn't it something?
And she remembered me, and of course, then of course it just hit me who she was, why I recognized her.
Right.
Of course, it was a vivid memory at that point, but it had been so many years.
Right.
And of course, asked about her grandparents, who had been gone for several years at that point, and explained to her that I never knew where I was is the only reason I did not come back. And do something for them.
Yeah.
Let them know that they saved my life.
Yeah.
And that they will forever be in my hearts. I mean, I met these people for a few hours, and I love them.
Uh-huh.
I love them dearly, and they will always be in my heart. And I let her know that, and I said, "Well, I can't thank them, but I can certainly thank you."
Yes.
And said, "And if any of those guys are still around, that your relatives that went in that car with me, you make sure you thank them for me too."
Right.
Because y'all all had a part in saving my life and making sure I got where I needed to be, so I wasn't, because one thing about abuse, you can get away, but then you get terrified of what you do now. Especially, I had a child with him. And a lot of these women go back for that reason. And you don't have to go back. Please, don't go back. If you get out, don't go back.
So did they did they take you? Where did they take you? I
They
mean,
took me back. I was actually at McDonald's when I was working there at the time. I was young. He had taken me from the parking lot, and I thought my vehicle was there. So they took me back there, and turns out my vehicle was still there, but he had taken my keys.
uh-huh.
So I couldn't go anywhere. A friend of mine happened through. Somebody I went to school with, was real close with him and his father, and his girlfriend at the time, and they took me back to their house for the night and continued my
Did you go
first
to?
aid that I needed.
Yeah. Did
And
you
I
go
went.
to?
I did go to the police the next morning.
Were they accommodating, or were they helpful?
I'm a little scared to voice the truth on that one.
Oh,
This was
okay.
a long time ago, and it was a different mentality. I'm sorry to say, but especially in this area, it was a very different mentality
Uh-huh.
to women being abused. It was very much a must be my fault
Yeah.
kind of mentality, and then when you tell someone like that he's also been raping you, it was almost laughable to a couple
Uh,
of the officers, because how in the world does a husband do that?
yeah.
Because he's your husband.
Because he's your husband, he has a right.
Yeah, he must have a right to
Yeah.
you anytime. No, ladies, he
Yeah.
does not.
That's right.
Your husband, that is a marriage license, not ownership papers. It's no title. It's a marriage license.
That's
It's a
right.
partnership.
Uh, is there anything that you would like people to understand? Anything more that you would like them to understand?
That there is help now.
Yes.
There is more help now. There's more awareness to this problem. There are, as that mentality has aged out, because it is kind of an older, but can be handed down. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying young people aren't doing this,
Uh-huh.
but that came from somewhere.
Right.
The thought that it's okay came from somewhere, and chances are from their own childhood, or watching it happen to their mother or their aunt or their grandmother or their sister, and that becomes okay.
Uh-huh.
It is very much hereditary. It can also not be, but if a young man sees his father do this and sees his mother tolerate it, they become to think it's normal.
And it's still going on.
It still goes
It
on
still
so
goes
much
on.
all the time.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience with domestic violence. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, I want to say just a couple more things, if you don't mind,
Oh,
Miss Scarlet.
absolutely.
Ladies, it is not your fault. It is not. I mean, really listen to my words here, and I'm serious and I'm heartfelt. It is not your fault. Whether you have done nothing and get beaten like this, or you have made a mistake, he's not your judge and jury. It is not his place to do the capital punishment. It is not. It is not your fault, and it is not okay. And there is help, and get out. And you will make it just fine, even with those kids, even with no job because he's kept you at home. You will make it, and you will be fine. Look at me.
That's wonderful.
And I went on to marry a fabulous, fabulous man who would have never dreamed of hurting me in any way,
Yeah.
and who cherished me and loved me dearly.
And that's very interesting too, because so many go back, or so many go choose another type person, even though they don't know it's that type of person. But there is something there that makes you marry or have a relationship with another abuser, and that's. I know of a woman who she picked 7 husbands, and they were all abusers.
Well, Miss Scarlett, my opinion on that is an abuser is going to completely control you. They're going to be a very jealous individual. And some women starting out view that, oh, as well, he just adores me so much. He just can't stand the thought of anybody looking at me, talking to me. It's because he just adores me so much. That is not it, ladies. It is ownership.
Control.
It is control. He doesn't love you. He loves the control.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
loves having property. You cannot truly love someone or something and purposely hurt it all the time. It's just not, that's not love.
Yep. Boy, that's so true. Well, I hope you, the listener, has a better understanding of what domestic violence is all about. And if you hear or see such violence, do what you feel you can to help without sacrificing your own safety, of course. If you can't step in, call for help immediately. Call for security or call the police. This must not continue. Silence only perpetrates the violence.
And silence will get you killed, ladies.
Yep.
Get help.
It is highly suggested by survivors of domestic violence that the only way we can help stop it is by talking about it. If you are a victim of domestic violence, tell someone, tell the police, tell everyone you know. It is not something to be ashamed of because it is not your fault, as Ava emphasized. The more that the predator thinks people know, the less harm he is apt to do, because then his life is at stake. So everybody must talk about it. If you would like to comment on today's talk, write to me at scarlettcampbell@tds.net. And remember, you can pick up a copy of my book of High Self-Esteem at Jasper Drugstore or the IGA at Foothills Shopping Center. Next week, we will be talking about and sharing information on what we, all of us, can do to help stop sexual abuse in children. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life. This is Scarlet Campbell. Thanks again for listening.